I want to talk to you today about your mission. Your mission. We're going to do what we call a standalone message today, which means we're not part of a larger series. Next week, we are starting a series called God and Government. And so this is actually the message today is kind of a lead-in. I think it sets a good foundation for the message we're going to talk about next week. I want to begin today by showing you some pictures. These are sort of memes, and if you've heard, you've seen these perhaps somewhere, these pictures, they say, you had one job. And so if we could, I want to bring up a few of these pictures that are going to show us some people who presumably they had one job. So if we could see the first picture here that is on the screen. Now, some of you are still trying to figure out what's wrong with that picture. Don't worry about it. Just bless your heart. Here's the second picture that I want to show you. Yes, you see the challenge, you see the problem with that? Here's the final one, which may be my favorite one, if we could. If you notice, this is a work-free drug place. Some of you may have worked at places like that. Not much work going on, but we got a lot of drugs. The thing that's interesting and kind of funny about these is that the person had like one job, but you blew it. And I want to ask this question this morning. What if Jesus were to come and look at us and we were to hire him to come in and be a consultant to evaluate, kind of determine how are you doing? And he evaluated us corporately as a church, kind of us as Grace Chapel. But then we had Jesus set up some personal appointments with each of you. Like he went to your home and he did some interviews and he kind of scanned through the course of your week and he evaluated you on how you're doing at your one job. What we're going to look at today is this core mission that he has given us. And to kind of give you a hint at what that mission is not, Jesus has not commissioned us to get more people to attend a service on a Sunday morning, which we absolutely want to do. For those of you who are online, come join us or invite more people to join us and connect with us online. He's not commissioned us, and our main mission is not to do really good things like give money or to serve people. Our main mission that he's called us to as a church is not to create more ministries, or even right now we're in the process of going through a campaign to build a building. The main mission he's called us to is not even to build buildings. And I would say for you, if your barometer, what you use to determine your success as a follower of Jesus is showing up on a Sunday morning, first of all, thank you for being here. I'm so glad that you are. But if it's showing up on a Sunday morning, occasionally giving and occasionally trying to be a good moral person, if Jesus were to come in and consult with us and evaluate, I think he would say, I gave you one job. And you're doing lots of good things that I want you to be doing that really you could say these are subsumed under this one broader goal, this one big win that I've called you to, but that's not the one job. That's what we're going to see this morning in Matthew chapter 28. If you'll open your Bibles, Matthew chapter 28, we're going to begin in verse 16, and what we're going to see here is the main mission that Jesus has given us. First of all, corporately as a church, as we gather together. But here's what I would like for you is to evaluate personally. This is the main mission that Jesus has given you. This is not a mission that is reserved for people who are in quote-unquote full-time ministry, people who have a Bible degree, people who are missionaries, people who are somehow these different type people. This is actually the main mission that he has given every person who has called upon his name for salvation. Matthew 28, beginning in verse 16. We read, this is after Jesus' death and his resurrection. The 11 disciples proceeded to Galilee. The reason one is gone is Judas. You know the story. He's not around anymore. So he appeared to the 11 disciples, proceeded to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had designated. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some were doubtful. And Jesus, in verse 18, speaks directly to what he wants to see in them from this point forward. And in verse 18, and Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. In the 1940s, the idea was proposed to build a ship that was to be the largest and fastest ship of its kind that had ever been built anywhere in the world. It was to be the SS United States. And the total cost was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million. And as plans were made for this ship, the U.S. government saw this is an opportunity, this is potential for us, and decided to put in $50 million toward the creation, the development, the building of this ship. And in 1952, the U.S. United States set sail. And when it set sail, it did break records. It was the largest, fastest ship of its kind. And in terms of like transatlantic travel, it set records for how quickly it could transport passengers. And the U.S. government had decided that they wanted to fund the building of this ship, or at least the majority of it, so that it could be a troop carrier. And it could transport some 10,000 troops at one time into battle. Well, the ship makes its maiden voyage in 1952, and for the next 17 years carries people, but not as a troop carrier. It carried people as a luxury liner. When that ship was finally docked, the SS United States was docked at Pier 82, Delaware River, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it has sat there since that time, never having transported any soldiers into battle. In fact, now there are people who, as of 2009, that had come in and said, because this ship is just sitting there and decaying, we're going to try to raise funds to make sure that we can save the SS United States. They've developed a conservancy for the SS United States, and it's ironic and tragic, isn't it, at the same time, that a ship that was built to save lives is now having to be saved itself. And one really smart guy within kind of the church world, Tom Rainer, he says that there are about 73% of churches that are declining. And one of the biggest new kind of phenomenons within church world is that 19% of those are categorized as what they would call rapidly declining. He would say his best estimates are that between 5,000 to 10,000 churches will close their doors every year within this nation. What's interesting is that a group of people who were called to save lives, others are now having to come in and try to save them. They're trying to prop them up. They're trying to figure out, is there a way that we can stay financially viable to continue this ship? What happens when we forget our mission? When we experience mission drift, we can get to a place where we actually miss the very purpose, the core reason. We don't do the main job that God has given us to do. And what I want to share with you just very simply today, the central truth is this. Friends, I want you to know that your mission matters. Now, our mission as a church, it matters, it's significant, it's meaningful. But friends, your mission in your life, the one that God calls you to carry out in the 6+ days of the week that you're not here gathering together, your mission, it matters. We see the words of Jesus here. I hope we would all have this understanding that if he were to come and evaluate us or talk to us, that we could say, I'm effective at doing a lot of other things, and look at all these good deeds that I've done. But if he were to say, okay, yes, you've done those good things, but I've called you to one core thing, and that's to make disciples, that we in response would be able to say, okay, yes, I'm being obedient to the command that you've given me because I didn't justify, I didn't make excuses, I didn't try to say, well, that must be for somebody else. I took the command that you gave me, and I sought to be obedient to it. Now, when we say the word disciple, I know you may wonder, okay, that sounds a bit strange. We're familiar with the terminology of Christian. In reality, you may be familiar with this. Christian in the New Testament really was not a thing. Kind of the first references to people who were Christians it was kind of a derogatory type term. The term that Jesus consistently used to speak to the people who were followers of his was the term disciple. And it's variously defined. Some people define a disciple as a lifelong learner and follower. I think if you look at overall the kind of the life and ministry of Jesus and what he called people to, I think the definition I really like of a disciple is this. It is someone who hears and obeys the voice of Jesus. It's not complicated. There's not a lot to it. It's just somebody who's in tune and is listening, is leaning in. They're hearing the word of Jesus and they're obeying it. They're living it out in their everyday life. And so a person who is a disciple is somebody who is hearing and obeying Jesus, and a disciple maker is someone who is helping other people do the same. Now, I know at this point, some of you have probably already formed your objections. Not out loud, but inwardly, you're creating some objections. And so I'm just going to refer to those as excuses for just a moment. And I want to share with you 3 of the common excuses that we tend to give, just in general, that we would say, well, disciple making is for somebody else. Yeah, maybe it's my main mission, but here are 3 very common excuses. The first is, I don't have what it takes. Now, it's probably going to be different for all of you. Some of you may say, well, I don't have enough knowledge. I don't have enough training. I don't have enough experience. I don't have what it takes. Maybe something that you would say. We're just going to try this. And if it doesn't go well, we're not going to do this in the second service. But I want to ask you to do a clap for if this is something that you felt before. I just want you to, for a moment, if you would, clap if this is something that you've sensed before. I don't have what it takes. Anybody here? Okay, quite a few of you. That's good. This is going to help me know how long I need to preach as we move through the following portions of this message. So here's the second excuse, is this: I don't have anyone to disciple. Right? I mean, who wants to listen to me? Who wants to learn from me? Who wants to be with me? If you would, same thing. If you would clap if you've ever sensed this or felt this. Anybody out there? A few of you? Okay. All right, yeah. So here's a third excuse, and if you're online, you can type in if this is relevant to you, I guess. The third excuse that we tend to give is this: I don't know how. I don't know how to disciple someone. What does that even look like to be a disciple maker? Could you clap if you would, if you've ever sensed that or felt that? Okay, so now I know where I need to preach the longest in each of these areas. So here's what I want to do. From Matthew chapter 28, the words that Jesus gives us here, I want to share with you 3 reasons why you can be a disciple maker. I know we've all got our excuses, we've got our reasons, our justifications. We have all that, but embedded within the words of Jesus, I think he gives us 3 reasons why every person who's a follower of his can be a disciple and can be a disciple maker. The first reason is this, is because you have all the power that you need. You may say, I don't have what it takes. I don't know. Well, if you go back and you look at what Jesus teaches us here, in these verses, it says that we are, because he has given us this authority we find here, we find that all authority in verse 18 has been given to me, notice this, in heaven and on earth. This key word authority here, Jesus possesses all of it. Now, to illustrate authority, I want you to think about a referee. You think about a basketball game, and you watch on TV, and you see that there's this one referee out there, kind of frail, probably not big, strong, whatever. When they put the whistle in their mouth, they have authority over players who are bigger, stronger, faster, richer, more popularity, more acclaim. That one referee, because they put the whistle in their mouth and they've got the stripes on, they have more authority than the owner of the entire team. With that whistle, they can exert and exercise authority. What we see here is that Jesus has all authority. And you may look at your life and think, well, look at me. I'm not much. I don't know what I have to contribute or to offer. If you say, I want to be a disciple maker, I want to invest my life into the lives of other people, you're not going on your own authority. You're going in and with the authority that Jesus has given. We see this demonstrated through the very lives of the disciples that Jesus had. At this point, 11, they would come to have 12. But these were, if I were to kind of think about the kind of guys these were, where I grew up, they would be cut-off shirts, blue jeans, probably some holes where they've worn their jeans out. Their pants are tucked into like part of their boot and part of it's hanging out. They got their cap with a little hook on the top, and the cap is pointed over to the side. I don't know what vision you would have of somebody who is equivalent to Jesus' followers. Just picture 12 guys that you went to high school with. I don't know what that vision is for you, but just kind of 12 ordinary guys. Now, if you line them up, you set them in a row, and you said, these will be the men who will transform the world, you would say, you're kidding me. These guys probably aren't going to graduate high school. I mean, these guys are going to have a struggle getting into college or whatever. They're not going to accomplish anything, right? I mean, that would be the picture that you would have of just 12 random guys that you went to high school with. Friends, these were blue-collar type men. And Jesus is coming to them, and he's appealing to them and saying, listen, men, I want you to go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. And he's communicating to them that the means by which you go, this commission that I'm giving to you is built upon this claim of my authority. And when you go, you don't go in your own power and your own strength. You go in the authority of Jesus. We find this in the life of Paul. We find demonstrated, Paul is hard-hearted. He hates Jesus. He hates Christians. He doesn't believe in any of this stuff. And God grabs hold of Paul's heart, transforms him, and from that point forward, Paul became this adamant, passionate follower and proclaimer of Jesus. How did that happen? It wasn't the winsomeness of man's speech. It was the power of the gospel. That's why Paul can say Romans 1:16 when he makes this very clear confession, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it, friends, is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. It is this gospel, we find Acts 17:6, that as the gospel is moving forth, that the men and people in this city, they said of this movement, they said, these are the men who have turned the world upside down, and they are here as well. It is that same gospel that Jesus has given us, and that, friends, is what carries the weight. That's the whistle of God's authority. Let me say this pastorally and lovingly as I possibly can. If you say, I don't have what it takes, let me say this graciously, you risk making God a liar. Because Jesus said right there, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. So don't you dare, if you're one of my children, if you're one of my followers, don't you dare say, you don't have what it takes. All authority has been given to me. So that's the first reason. You have all the power that you need. The second reason is this. You have people in your life who need to be discipled. If you look here and you might have the excuse to say, well, I don't have anyone around me. When Jesus makes this statement, go therefore, the most literal translation of this is as you are going. In other words, it's implied that you're already moving along through the course of your life. And as you are going, make disciples. As you're going into your workplace, as you're raising your children, as you are going and living your life, that is the context in which and through which you are to make disciples. One of the things I love right now in our church as a whole, we want to reach out to just our Silver Heights community. August 28th, we're going to be having, it's a picnic, but it's just a way of saying, hey, we're here, we care, we love you. And the thing that I love about this, it is us as a church saying we want to be proactive. We know that God has placed us here providentially for a reason. And so we want to invest in and we want to let others know that we actually care and we're here, not just for ourselves, but we're here for them. We have people as a church who need to be discipled, but here's what I would also say. You in your life have people who need to be discipled. I don't know what your stage of life is. I don't know, some of you may say, well, I've been making babies. I haven't had time to make disciples. And if that's the case, I would say I'll start making disciples of those babies. And if they become disciples, there's a lot less chance later on they're going to remain dependents when they become adults. And if you're at the stage of life where your children are grown, they're raised, and you have grandchildren, start making disciples. Start figuring out, again, as you are going, there are people in your life who need to be discipled. Imagine with me, if you went into a medical school and you walked into one of the classrooms and you saw a room full of students. They're all kind of mid-20s and bright and eager-eyed and ambitious. And then you find over there in the corner, there's one guy in his 60s. And you go up to him and you kind of don't understand why would a guy in their 60s be here. Maybe he's auditing the course or what the situation is. And you say, why are you here in this medical class? He says, well, I'm a student. And you say, that's what? You're a student. That's amazing. You're in your 60s and you're a student here in this medical school. Gosh, how did you go through this? And he proceeds to tell you, well, I graduated in 1972. I got my medical degree. It's hanging at home. But you know what? When I graduated, I just didn't feel like I was ready to go into practice. I even became a surgeon. And I went through all the procedures to become a surgeon. But I just don't feel like I'm ready yet. You would say to that surgeon, sir, there are people who need to be operated on. There are people who are sick. There are people who need the training. There are people who need the experience. There are people who need the knowledge that you have in your minds. So I, sir, would humbly suggest to you that you get out of the classroom and you get into the operating room. You have one main job. And I wonder if over and against our excuse, I don't have anybody to operate on. I've been really busy. I'm doing a lot of good things, and I'm serving the church, and I'm on this team, and I give, and I do all this good stuff. Are you doing the main job that Jesus has called you to? So the first reason I believe that you can be a disciple maker is because you have all the power that you need. Second reason is because you have people in your life who need to be discipled. The third reason is this, is because you have a pathway. You have a pathway to follow. Jesus didn't just give this generic mission without giving instruction. And in this pathway that he has given to us, we see here that we are to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This essentially just is a call for commitment. It's a call to identification with the person of Jesus. And so we have a call for commitment. Then there is this instructional element when he says, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. Obedience doesn't have a shelf life. Obedience is a blessing. And essentially it is us saying, here's what I'm learning. As a follower of Jesus, am hearing the word of Jesus and seeking to obey Jesus, here's what I'm learning personally. So there's this call to instruction. But then there is also, and I think this is unique to Jesus' model of transformation, there is also a relational piece to this. When he says, I am with you always. Please note about Jesus' model of discipleship is that it was always relational. In Jesus' model, you didn't have relationship on one hand and discipleship on the other. The two were wed together. And so when you think about if you have instruction without relationship, you have teaching. Teaching is a good thing. When you have relationship without instruction, you have friendship. Friendship is a really good thing. But what the call that Jesus gives us to discipleship is this. It's when teaching and relationship come together. It's when you're walking with someone, not over someone. It's when you're helping to bear their burdens and they are helping to bear yours. It's when, as Paul would say, 1 Thessalonians 2, it's when you're not just sharing the gospel of God with them, but you're sharing your own lives. And so we see here these two themes coming together of teaching and relationship. And that, I would submit to you, that's what discipleship is. That's the core of it. And if you say, well, I really don't know where to begin, right now I would encourage you to pray and ask God to bring someone to mind that He would have you to begin discipling. And if you're at a place where you're young in your faith and you say, oh my word, disciple making, this is huge, pray that God would bring somebody into your life or into your sphere of influence that could actually invest in and disciple you. Pray to Him right now as I'm talking about this. And here's the key point. At some point, if you're going to actually make disciples, you talk to God, but at some point you have to talk to people. At some point, you have to engage them, and in and through that context of relationship, you have to present the ask, and you have to say, look, you don't have to present it in some kind of formal way where you say, right now, would you like to engage in a form of spiritual friendship whereby we study the Scriptures together and grow in our development and become more like Jesus, furthering our sanctification toward glory? You don't have to give some kind of big presentation like that. Right? So here's your ask. Hey, I'm reading through the Bible right now, and I would love to have somebody come and read along with me. That's it. I would love to have somebody on a regular basis each week. We sit down and we have coffee, or we talk over Zoom, or we whatever. I would love to have somebody as we go on walks or whatever. I'm reading through the Bible right now. I would just love to have somebody to talk through what I hear Jesus saying to me in the areas in my life where I need to grow in my obedience. I'm not there, and God didn't call me to do it alone. So I'm just coming and I'm asking you, would you want to go on this journey with me? Friends, any of us can do that. It's not this complicated, like you've got to have these big books that you walk through and study. I would say if your understanding of discipleship begins and ends with a study manual, you have absolutely missed the essence and the heart of discipleship. And you're going to study, you're going to open up the Word, and you're going to see what it says. But friends, the heart of this is relational. So let me give you the one requirement that you need to have. So we see the reasons we can be disciple makers. We have the power, we have the people, and Jesus has given us the pathway. There's one requirement I would give to you, and it's this. It's to have persistence and patience. Jesus, in these closing lines, He says, "Lo, I'm with you always, even to the very end of the age." This mission, this main mission that Jesus gave, was not to be a fad, a flash in the pan, hey, go follow this trend and then figure out something to do. And if we're not careful, all of us, as a church and as individuals, we will experience mission drift. We'll get so preoccupied and so focused on doing so many things that we lose sight of the best thing. And with regard to making disciples and thinking about this being something that requires persistence and patience, you just need to know, in terms of your expectations, making disciples is slow and small work. It is not fast and big. Now again, we can get enamored with the things that are fast and are big and church growth and all these sorts of things, but actually making disciples, it takes time. You think about it in your own life. I look at myself, I'm 44 years old today, and I'm like, there are some areas where I don't know that I've matured since I was 15. Like, there are challenges and struggles, and I'm like, why does it take so long? But I thank God that there were men like Bobby Lipscomb and Rodney Nobles and Sam Walden and Bradley Hill and these men who were patient and persistent, women like Gina Davis, who they just said, we're going to invest in you, and you're going to have some struggles. You're going to have some ups and downs. But friends, just know, this is a lifelong commitment. And you may get into a discipleship relationship, and the first 3 or 4, for whatever reason, don't pan out. It doesn't it doesn't in any way allow us to begin abstaining from the calling that He's given us. So I'll close with two questions. To apply this to your life, the first question is this: who are you discipling? It's probably going to vary depending on what the setting of your life is. We find 1 Timothy 2, 1 and 2, talking about discipleship within the home. I would say if you're a parent, begin there. Titus 2, 3 through 5 speaks of older women discipling younger women. If you find yourself at a place where you are more mature in your life than are some others, begin discipling them. Titus 2, 6 through 8, Paul talks to Titus about investing in younger men. If you're a man who is more mature, then begin investing in other men. Picture with me, you come in here on a Sunday morning, you get your refreshments, you have coffee, we gather together, we sing some songs. I tell you, here's what's going on in the life of our church, and we have this great time together. And then after we sing the songs and we take our offering, we close the Bible and we say, have a great week, we'll see you next week. If I did that one Sunday, here's what you ought to do as a church. You ought to say, Brian, we were unfaithful to Jesus today because we didn't open the Scriptures and see what God had to say. You would call me on that, would you not? I mean, you would say, hey, we need to be opening up the Word and preaching it. Because we have one core thing we do on a Sunday morning in addition to everything else that happens. And friends, I would say to you in your life, the one core thing you need to be doing, in addition to all these other good things, is making disciples. Not complicating it, not excusing it, not justifying it. And so if you went through the core of like all of your life and Jesus sat down with you and said, you did a lot of really good things, but here's one thing I want you to do. I want you to make disciples. Otherwise, you're being disobedient. So the question is, who in your life are you discipling? The second question is this: how are you discipling them? Discipleship really can take a lot of different forms. I don't think there's any one size fits all for everybody. If you think about it in terms of there's a broad general, there's the group or the church. We're called to make disciples. That's reflected in our vision. That's really what Right, Real, Ready is about. It's a discipleship process. But then as individuals, each of you are called to make disciples. And so here are some ways that we want to do that as a church body. We talk about these consistently. They're community groups. Community groups are a way that you can step forward and say, I want to begin hearing the voice of Jesus and obeying it, and I want to help other people do the same. It's not because I'm the most capable. It's not because I'm the smartest. It's because I want to be an obedient follower of Jesus. It's community groups. We also have things called journey groups. Journey groups are different. You can find out more information after this out in the foyer. Contact us sometime. These are groups that are really, they're focused on one particular topic. They have a set start and an end time, but they're focused on helping you learn and grow in your faith. You could be a journey group leader. You could be a journey group participant. We have women's Bible study that's going to start here this fall. It's an opportunity for you to learn and grow and to be a disciple. But then speaking specifically about individually, if you're at a place where you say, I want to begin making disciples, again, I would point you toward a community group or journey group within the context of Grace Chapel. But if you say, I want to begin doing this as a man, specifically to men, we're going to begin this fall, 12 weeks we're going to take, and I'm just going to walk through, here's what it looks like to disciple men. And if you want to do that, you want to get on board, we'll be sending out information about that. It's going to launch in September. And the last thing I'll say is this, is that if you're at a place where you don't have a good answer to that question, who are you discipling? Well, I'm not discipling anybody. I've been a follower. I've had my degree as a Christian for 30, 40 years. If you're not following or you're not discipling anyone right now, I would say this to you. Every Sunday, there is an opportunity to be obedient to the teaching of Jesus right here by going and serving and discipling our children. And I've prayed through, thought through how to communicate this, and I don't know where your heart is. I don't know. You may be following this passionately and obediently, but I would say to you, if you make the decision, or if you come to the awareness of that you're not currently making disciples, and you choose not to make disciples with the children who we have coming here each week, you're making a decision to be disobedient to Scripture. So I don't know what context discipleship needs to look like for you, but friends, my role and my goal is to say, go get it. Go be about that work. Whether it's here as a church or it's you in your office place, whatever the setting or the context is, as you are going, go and make disciples. Because your mission matters. Father, thank you so much for Jesus. Thank you for your word. And just thank you for this teaching on discipleship. I think about my own life and struggles, and it's just difficult to do this consistently over the course of time. But I pray for your grace. I pray for your Spirit to move and to work. I pray for each one of us, myself included, to be resolved at the end of hearing your word that we are going to make disciples. It doesn't mean that we're perfect. It doesn't mean that we have everything together in our lives. It just means that we're seeking to hear the voice of Jesus, obey the voice of Jesus, and then to the extent that we possibly can, under his authority, help others do the same. I pray this in the great name of Jesus. Amen.